Welcome back to another episode of the Briefcase in the Barn, episode 51, a series of the Furious, the Curious show where we talk about business, life, Christianity, and more. Thanks for being here. It's 9 o'clock on Tuesday night, and I don't know if I'm ready for this, but
what episode are we on? Sorry,
51.
Really distracted there.
51.
Okay.
Almost a year.
Okay, are we done yet?
No, 31 once.
31.
I believe it's 126 episodes. Let me do the math here a second.
Is it 126 or 130?
124. It's 31 times 4.
Okay.
I'm sure there's something. Yeah, anyways.
Okay. One of the feedback that we often get is that the too much interrupting each other.
A YouTube comment on it.
Yeah.
Great content, interrupt way too much.
That's one of the things that bothers me the most about watching political debates.
Oh.
Because it's just so rude to interrupt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do it the most of anybody I know next to you, but it's bothers me that I do it. I interrupt my wife a lot too.
It's about listening.
Listening
is a skill that you can
learn.
learn.
Yeah. How do you learn it? How do you learn to be a better listener?
Well, you have to be interested.
Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is for a lot of people.
Most people are so self-absorbed, they don't care what anyone else is talking about.
Exactly. And so, yeah.
When is it my turn to share? What's on my heart?
Or they don't want to share because they're just like scared.
No, but how do you how would you become a good, what would be some practical things that you could do to be a better listener?
You almost never know. It's like factually true that you almost never know the full story, right? There's details you're missing on whatever.
So your assumptions by nature will be incorrect, is what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Or
generally speaking, your assumptions are going to be wrong, right? So you can always,
some degree.
Yeah. So you can always just like get clarification and learn. I love clarity. I was actually mocking you a little bit this week. I was laughing at you because I seen your Jetta ad on Facebook. Your diesel Jetta. You
sold it right away too with that ad.
And
granted, I sold it for half of what I was asking, so it's pretty easy to sell stuff if it's 50% off. But
so I took a screenshot of it and I sent it to Gary and I said, "Look at this clarity. This is amazing."
I thought you were being sarcastic. I
No,
assumed you were being sarcastic.
I was being dead serious.
Okay. What did I say?
You said I'm always clear except for on the podcast.
I did. I think I did say that actually. And one of the things I do too much is that I say everything that's on my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Like not in the podcast, but everywhere else. Good. That is good. Because it would be offensive,
slow to speak,
unfortunately. It's different if you're in a controlled environment, right? But the minute you put something out there where it's being recorded and posted,
yeah, you have to be more intentional.
You have to be more intentional what comes out of your pie hole, right? Because there are different things that can be said in different environments. And there again, people will assume things or misconstrue what's being said based on just.
But I think it's always good. If you just live the same everywhere, then it's usually pretty easy.
And I don't feel like I'm that disingenuous. I just feel like the tone I would talk with or the joking around that I would do with somebody really close to me in a small setting is just not how I'm necessarily.
There's certain reels I won't send.
You won't.
I'll always send to Nicole.
I always find the other thing that I find interesting about the podcast, because I always talk to people about it.
Yeah.
Like people just randomly, like I'll be at some ordering. The other day I was at Dairy Queen and some guy who I don't know is like, faithful listener to the podcast. Nice to meet you. I'm like, any criticism? No, just keep it up.
Just keep going.
Yeah, just keep it up. Buy me an ice cream. All the money that you make from the podcast.
Yes. So that's what I was going to get to. So people are coming to me and say, is that all you do? Just the podcast? Like this is some like cash cow. No, it costs me money. It costs about $3,000 a month to run it.
Oh wow. Yeah. Could cost less. We could just do no reels, no.
We could do no reels. We could do no thumbnails. We could save a lot of money in a bunch of ways. But
do people need the thumbnails? If you ever done a poll on, or do you see that it just allows people to skip the great content?
It allows people to skip it. Yeah. If it just have no thumbnail, yeah. Or maybe we would. I don't know. I just want to do a good job.
Is that what classifies a good job? Those editing pieces?
Yeah, I think about how to match it to the title, and I think about how it matches to the content. I think about how to engage. It's just another form of communication, just like audio is. It's just through visual.
So I need to get rid of my music song on Spotify here before I accidentally play Afro Man.
See, that's the real Gary. He comes in here just rocking Afro Man. Do not.
Well, I was just.
Okay, what are we talking about today? We did not read the chapter. Like I said,
no, one more time. We're sparing the people that struggle with the book report, all the people that don't like education.
Okay, well, I got one here.
One thing I was going to say. Sorry, go ahead. Do you want me to save you from yourself? You probably need to be saved from yourself, I'm guessing.
No, I'm trying hard not to interrupt.
Okay, good job. Sorry, I'm not trying hard. I was going to say, I've had a lot of people bug me about Freedom Session, and the link is live, I'm 99% sure, on the Central Community website.
For the local
Chilliwack, for those that live in the area that want to take it, that feel called to come along.
Is the Alberta one live?
No, not yet.
What about the Ontario one? That one live?
There's lots of Freedom Session in Ontario, I would assume, in Southern Ontario. Just look it up on their Freedom Session website. Okay. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I came across this quote today from John Piper. Satan devotes 168 hours a week to trying to deceive you. Do you think you can maintain a renewed mind with a 10-minute glance at God's book once a day?
Interesting.
Probably not.
No, probably not.
Probably
Say
not.
it one more time.
Satan devotes 168 hours a week trying to deceive you. All week he's trying to deceive you.
Yeah.
Do you think you can maintain a renewed mind with a 10-minute glance at God's book once a day? Do you think you're going to be able to have a renewed mind and follow God when you're just only reading the Bible for 10 minutes a day?
Yep.
And the rest of the time, Satan's trying to convince us that it's all about here and now. And
it was interesting. I listened to, I don't know if I plugged this podcast before, but Matt Chandler's a preacher down at the Village Church in Texas. He's a pretty well-known preacher. I really appreciate his preaching. But he has his own podcast as well outside of that, similar to how our pastor has the Deep Thoughts. He has one called The Overcomers. Has a lot of great guests on there. And it was a very interesting podcast this week. It might not have been this week, sorry. But it was a podcast where his wife, Lauren, interviews him. And he went through, and it's just made me think of it because we're talking about Freedom Session and even this about, fighting Satan with how much time he spent in the Word. But his wife is asking him questions just about this period, like in 2015, where, and I don't want to misquote what happened, but basically just like a period of, I don't want to say burnout, but just definitely needed to do some healing. His words, he said it multiple times, was like, if 10 is completely snapping, like he was living at a 6 all the time, and then going into meetings and going into all these stressful things. So basically went and met this guy. Are we recording or are we not recording?
You were recording.
Just looking to see.
I'm just looking at the audio levels.
This is actually the night, because neither of us wanted to record tonight. I really didn't either.
I called Gary beforehand. I said, "Can we push it to Friday?"
Push it off. But we're already a day late because we couldn't record yesterday. It was insane in the day. Yesterday was Canada Day. Quite the fireworks show, eh?
It was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah? What do you think of that?
Yeah, it was good.
I know people always say you can't buy fun, but that's just not true. You can buy fireworks. I thought it was pretty awesome. It was such an adrenaline rush.
Kids loved it.
Yeah, kids were just pumped, right? Yeah.
Anyways, off track.
Off track. Back to the Overcomers podcast. He went and met this guy and did a bunch of personal healing through this experience. And a couple things that he really caught my attention were Matt Chandler. And like I say, very influential preacher. And so far, thank the Lord, has not had any horrible public sins that has disqualified him, which a lot of obviously famous pastors have over the years, right? Just fallen off.
Yeah.
So he just talks about one part that really caught my attention was just talking about how, you can do things. It's sometimes, and he explains it way better than I will, but a lot of people even have bugged us on the podcast, like, oh, how come you need to do freedom sessions, or how come you need to go to counseling, or, can't you just spend more time in the Word? And isn't God's Word enough? And like his words were, well, it's not that you wouldn't go to any counselor that wasn't, having a Christian worldview and a solid, follower of Jesus, but just this idea of like, these are gifts, common means of common grace, I think, where that's a term that he used, that God uses, whether it be coaching or counseling or freedom session or whatever. And I just think that we live in such a culture of individualism and just trying harder, that it was just fascinating to hear there again, a guy that's obviously was very successful. And then he goes on to say, well, that was in that season. And then their church went through a tough season and then went through COVID and everything else.
Yeah.
So that was just really interesting for me to hear that. And then at the end of the podcast, they end.
Well, what you're emphasizing there is community, right? Like we need each other. Like,
so that brings
if we
up,
think we can just be out fine ourselves. Like we constantly need help. Like we're weak. We need each other.
Yeah. So that brought up another thought that I had, and I had a listener randomly call in the last week. It sounds like a very faithful listener, so he'll hear this too. And hopefully I still have his number, because I was going to call and talk to him about it directly. But he had shared that he's living pretty remotely, I think, or definitely not in a tight community. And he just randomly called me and appreciated the podcast and was super encouraging. But I should have said, like, because I asked him if he was going to church, and I think he's listening to sermons online and stuff, but and there again, that's great. But it's like, man, we need all people need to have some form of community and connectedness. Right. And, So that was another thing they talked about at the end of the Overcomers. And I mean, I'm basically sharing a good chunk of it, but they talk about loving the Lord your God. What are the greatest commandments, right? Loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Like all those, like your heart too, not just your mind. And
That's
then
right.
you talk about the word, and like so many of us are just, it's in our head.
Yeah.
It's how I grew up. It was like head knowledge, which that in and of itself is really not. He wants our heart, right?
Yeah.
And it made me think of it because I had another buddy recently that was talking about, we've talked about Sabbath day observance, right? And he was going off about how important it was to him and these types of things. And this guy's not a Christian to my knowledge, or hasn't professed his faith for sure. And I'm just thinking, dude, like you missed the first two most important commandments. There again, not that the fourth doesn't matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It's just like, you're missing it. You're missing the mark, man. Like you're not gonna, there's no check marks. There's no brownie points for box checking on Sunday, right? But anyways, it just caught that those conversations happened within 24 hours of each other, and listening to podcasts and talking to my friend. And anyways.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but there's someone set me up on a reel today about disciplining your kids, or only doing rewards-based systems. So not giving them an allowance, but they have to work for their money. Like they have to and they don't get money for chores. They need to learn just to do chores, but they can earn money other ways. And it's all about your input basically. So you don't become lazy and you
So sorry, did they agree with giving an allowance for no reason at all? Or
No.
Only for work?
Only for work.
Do you agree with that, or do you think kids should just get an allowance?
I need to think through it more, but this is my first reaction. I don't know 100%. We do give Malachi an allowance of his age, $6 a week right now. So I guess, I do. I'm okay with it.
Are you sure that's okay?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So anyways, that's okay, right?
I can't believe I got an allowance as a kid. Looking at my parents, for a period of time, for sure, they gave us an allowance. I don't know why.
I never got one.
Yeah. No, I could see that.
You have to earn.
Work harder, Kyle.
Anyways.
We worked as kids too. I was pretty useless. I don't think I did a lot of work when I was little at home. Like I hated working at home.
But if that's all you get, you don't understand grace to a degree.
I wouldn't equate the two.
No, but there's something to be said for that, right? When everything is constantly earning, and then all of a sudden you get to the gospel, which is like the complete opposite of that, the complete opposite of it, of being weak and receiving, like that goes against the grain, it goes against the pride, it goes against every fabric you haven't understood it. And I often feel guilty when I am inconsistent when I discipline Malachi or Peter. So if I say if you do that again, I'm going to you're going to go to bed tonight, whatever. And then they do it again. And then I don't send them to bed that night, whatever. So I don't follow through, because then I feel like I'm not teaching them being consistent and proper discipline, which I think there's something true to that. But you also read in God's word often, there's some places in the Old Testament where God was about to destroy Israel, and Moses pleaded, I think it is, on their behalf and said please don't. And God went back on it. He went back on his word of what he was going to do for what they did.
Well, he was gracious.
He was gracious.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm working through the Old Testament. It's like, patience.
Yes,
the patience.
Exactly.
With all of us.
Yeah. And so we tend to, I think, land on the side of hey, it has to be justice, has to be right.
None of us actually want justice, though.
No, but what I'm saying is that, this shows up we need to teach our kids how to work hard and do all these things. But we need to show them grace. When they over screw up, we can be over gracious sometimes too.
I feel like I have been lately.
To your kids?
Yeah. Well, because I've had some really good advice lately. I've got to the point in the last months, Marie and I both have, but for sure me, where I've been meeting with clients, real estate clients, and crying about my kids. People that a lot of my clients I know really well, and I'm just really struggling and really feeling hopeless. And people will be like, man, just pray for me, right? Send some random stranger's house. Yeah. And just encouraging. Awesome. Yeah, it's really special. But just just saying, hey, kids they need a lot of encouragement. And I mean, it's just, I can picture even how some of my kids would feel discouraged or, right? A lot of kids, even if I look back at my life in school, based on my school behavior, you would never assume that I would have ever been at all successful in any way else, going forward in life, right?
Same.
Right? So, and there's a lot of people that are like that. And so I do think that at least in the school our kids are going to now, and I think probably all schools to some degree, people that do education are starting to realize, hey, there's people that don't fit in this mold. So the way that we're teaching kids is changing. And I feel
to that, I took a video today. I was in my office, and Malachi was roller skating in circles downstairs on the driveway with a whiteboard in his hand, trying to read 5 words, and he was learning to read.
Harsh ADHD.
Whatever it was, but he was figuring it out. He was like trying to spell them out.
And exercise.
Yeah.
So I just look at like the kids, and it's like, hey, it's just, there's a lot of negative feedback whenever you're just misbehaving and not sitting properly, and now you're, interacting physically with other kids. That's obviously not allowed in any way.
Yeah.
But
it's usually a cry for attention.
Yeah. There's
that's the heart.
Yeah. But in our home, we're not doing allowance. And now I'm wondering if we should be. I'm going to think about that. I don't think so. Marie has a whole schedule on the fridge of all the jobs and all the ways you make money. And we have standard work that you do that you don't get paid for. There's jobs. She's an extremely good teacher.
Okay.
Like our kids are 5, 6, 7, and they are working. Like there are jobs. And
I could probably do more of that.
Yeah. And I think, you talked to me about it the other day, which was interesting, just the perspective from another parent, but even like our kids hiking the queue at, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, like it is hard. And it's every time there's sometimes they're better.
Yeah. So context for that was, I told Gary, I was impressed that,
my kids are doing 2-hour hikes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And feral kids, like they're all over the place.
Uncircumcised Philistines for sure. But if I berate them, and we just, sometimes I'm carrying 2 of them. I'm just like fired up, pretty angry. But no, you're
spending time, you're doing something.
Yeah. And I just look at it like a metaphor for life. Like that's what I teach them, right? I'm like, life is hard. Life is not fair. You might have a rock in your shoe. Who cares? Like just keep going. We'll be at the top soon. You can take it out then.
Yeah.
Just give her, right? And I think that overall, those hard lessons now at a young age, and they're going to be debatable how young they need to be, but I think that a lot of character is just built in pushing through things that are uncomfortable.
That's right. As long as it's not absent from also being loved and having grace.
Yeah, they get an ice cream treat sometimes when they're done, but not every time.
And you go to Dairy Queen and you just get one
big one. It drives my wife crazy.
It's so funny. I think you just
and I ask for 5 extra cups. No, I do it because it's just they don't need a lot of ice cream and it's more affordable. You can basically feed a family of 8 for like, I think a large is like $7.50 or $8. So
it is just wisdom.
Yeah. Anyways, it's mortifying for people that are with me.
No, I mean,
and the kids every time, like they should know, right? We've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now. Every time most of the kids ask if they can get their own.
And they still ask
every time. Yeah. Because on very special occasions they do. Okay, I'll think about the allowance thing. I'd be curious to know what people's thoughts. I'm sure there's varying degrees. I'm sure some people don't give allowance and some do. Our kids get birthday money from their grandparents, and don't worry about the time.
And we're going along tonight?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a marathon.
I usually go to bed at 9.
Do you actually do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go to bed at 9, wake up 5:30.
Okay, that's healthy. I go to bed in the a.m.
Well, Nicole goes to the gym at 6 a.m. 5 days a week.
Okay. Interesting. There's a lot of content in the show notes. Hey, we could go back weeks of questions and stuff that
There's
we
a lot. I wish I could react to stuff a lot faster, like some of the links we put in there. Because you got to
so it's actually relevant,
or just like an easy way to play it. Because if I don't have it set up beforehand, it's
it doesn't matter. People don't care. They like the real podcast where I went out and blew my schnauzer. It didn't bother anybody.
Okay, well,
doesn't phase them. You have
away.
Oh, you have a question you want to answer?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So the question is, got notes here because I want to be prepared and not just wing it. So I said last week I'd answer this. So the question is, I think this came in from the same person that asked about assurance. The NRC and RCNA churches in Chilliwack are such a mystery to other people who don't attend. Can you shed a light on what it's actually like? I've heard there's a stop light at the entrance of the church to let regular attendees choose their seat before visitors, or the rigidness and, for lack of better word, doom of their sermons, lack of grace and hope. Okay. Ready for this?
It's not for me. I mean, I gave you the whole analogy.
But I want you can interrupt and ask questions, clarifying questions.
Okay, I'll give my thoughts after.
Okay. So I first want to say I'm somewhat reluctant to answer the question because it's only based on my perspective, right? So every person's perspective is different.
Yeah, and I always struggle with descriptions of bodies because I always feel like it's stereotypes and paintbrushing, and I feel it's just really dangerous.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So my perspective is being based on being in the NRC until I was 30, and my dad being a pastor in the NRC for over 30 years.
Yeah.
So I know it can easily be taken, like a question like this can be taken as me like NRC bashing NRC, which I've been accused of. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I think we need to separate disagreeing with what is taught versus and what people are believing versus bashing. Like for example, growing up, I was taught really clearly how the Roman Catholic Church was wrong, or how the evangelical churches are wrong. Like it's not. I think we can just clarify on what we believe, what we don't believe, and what's different. But that we can separate that from criticizing people. So that's the perspective I come from. So like I have lots of family and friends who are members of the NRC and RCNA that I love, and so I'm just like, it's not personal or anything. But first of all, I thought I'd give a brief history of these churches for anyone who's listening who doesn't understand any context.
Oh, I'm interested to hear the history.
Okay.
This came up just the other day.
Of the NRC and the RCNA
started.
Okay.
Interesting.
So the NRC started in 1907 by Reverend Kirsten, who brought a bunch of churches together and started the denomination in 1907.
Was it a split from another church?
No, it was a joining of a bunch of churches.
Oh, cool.
Something with the Ladybourne churches or something, I think, if I remember correctly.
Okay, cool.
And cool story, the house that he lived in, he could see a village across another village from his window or whatever.
Okay.
And that was one of the churches he joined. And that I was born in that house in Meliscatica in Zeeland, which is called Sealand, basically. So
what was his motivation for bringing all these, and what types of churches were they, or you don't know?
I don't know the details of that now.
Yeah.
Oh, I think their details were on there, but I didn't want to keep it that long. But interesting guy, though. He even started an NRC political party, which believe still exists today.
Okay.
And he was elected to Parliament in 1922. Okay. And he would, and this is the Dutch Parliament, he would remain in Parliament until he was banned in 1945.
So that would have been right after the war he was banned.
Yes. So this was because during World War II, Kirsten denounced resistance against the Nazis, claiming the occupation of the Netherlands was a deserved divine punishment for people not keeping the Sunday holy.
This guy was serious about the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was very serious about it. That was a big sin, I guess.
Where did you pull this info from?
Online. It's on the history pages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kirsten also refused to sign a 1941 protest of the Covenant of Dutch Churches against the persecution of Jews during the war. So that's why after the war, a government committee barred him from returning to Parliament because he didn't support the Jews. So that's how it started. In 1953, the NRC had a church split, and that's where the NRC denomination came in.
Can I interrupt with a very completely unrelated but interesting aside? So I got these round balers in from Austria.
This is totally
aside. It just made me think of it. So we're hanging out with these Austrian guys, one American guy that grew up in Illinois, and the guy who's complete Austrian. I don't know if I said this last week in the podcast, that they have a house, like his grandparents' house was built in 1654 or something crazy. Anyways, there is a family, and I wish I knew what it was now, but there is a family in Austria that is banned from being in political office of any kind. Ever.
Oh,
for life. It's in the Constitution.
Wow.
And it's because that over the years, and I mean, he had a whole example. The American could articulate it really well. He knew his wife's Austrian. He's American. He knew a lot about Austrian history. Anyways, he basically said that this family, if you went back in the 50 years or 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, all the kings, the king of Spain, the king of the Netherlands, all these kings were all from this one family.
Oh.
And so they were so wealthy and they controlled so much of the world that they just decided that, hey, these people cannot be in control. Where anybody in their extended family's banned. Anyways, it was just very fascinating that, So we think in our society where we look at like these weird things that happen where, we just arbitrarily decide things. I mean, they decided enough people agreed with that at one point where they're like, hey, these people
democracy is only great when you're the majority.
That's a great quote right there. Sorry. Back to the history of the Netherlands Reformed Congregation. Sorry.
Yeah. So, how did the RCNA get involved? So in 1953, the NRC had a church split, and that's where the RCNA denomination started. And it was because a student in theological school named C. Stoneblock, I guess it is in English, was dismissed from the theological seminary of the NRC because he taught that God does not offer grace to all sinners, but only those persons who are elect and acknowledge their sins. Which I think is still the difference today between NRC and RCNA. I'm not 100% sure because I think there's I don't know. So, but the North American NRC churches had already started at that time, mainly because families escaping the ruins of World War II, so like in the 1940s, and also escaping the big flood in 1953 when a dike broke in Holland and flooded a whole big part of Holland. That was the year my dad was born. Like anybody knows Mr. Koyman, like he was a local farmer here.
Yeah.
His family still farms. He was in that flood, actually. I think he lost a brother in that flood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was 1953. So a lot of farmers came to...
Did the split not happen initially in Ontario? Or
No.
did it happen in Holland?
Happened in Holland.
Okay, somebody told me the other day. It's okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so and in 1967, the Chilliwack NRC were split with members of leaving to form the RCNA in Chilliwack.
Okay.
Yeah, and
okay.
Yeah, I didn't get into details of that. So just some stats. So in Holland right now, the RCNA has about 50 churches, 25,000 members, and 9 pastors. That's just in Holland. And then the NRC has 107,000 members in Holland, 150 churches, and 66 pastors.
Okay, it's huge in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
eh? Just don't realize that.
And it's 3 to 1 pastor ratio. So for every 3 churches, only 1 is a pastor.
Oh, those guys work hard.
Yeah,
They work hard.
yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, that is actually, so that was one of the we've had conversations about this topic this week I have with other people, and it ties into even, and somebody said it really bluntly, I don't know if it's a fair assessment, but it was just the idea that there'd be people that would feel called to preach or called to lead, and then other people would say, you're not called. Now, granted, I mean, even I would agree with the idea of discernment in people, but it's just like when you look at a body of people where there's 1,000 or 2,000 people or whatever, 1,000 people, you know, you look back to the Old Testament, the New Testament, I'm thinking, hey, there needs to be more than 3 leaders. I just don't see how you can't, you know, it just seems concerning to me where it's like even just a workload and the idea of like true discernment, you would want to have.
Full time, not like this is a side gig.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying that in total, right?
Yeah.
Even with and
because
just
otherwise
the amount of
like
workload, I feel so sorry for these men, how much weight they carry, right? And there again, I mean, obviously, it's I don't understand the inner workings. I just think healthy leadership is super important anywhere, right? And the church is probably the most important. So
So in North America, the RCNA has 4 or 5 churches. I couldn't clarify that, and about 2,000 members. So that's in all of North America, Canada, and U.S. And the NRC has about 11,000 members in Canada and U.S., 30 churches and 12 pastors. So roughly it's
2 to 1.
Yeah, 2 to 1 ratio. So, okay, so that's just some history. I thought I'd give people some context of what we're talking about here because a lot of people don't know because they are actually quite small.
I would stop there.
So, I know you would. I will answer any question. I'm not scared to answer. I'll give my honest opinion. It's not.
Yeah. It's just your opinion. Fair enough.
It's just I'm trying to be real and So the question again was that NRC and RCNA churches in Chilliwack are such a mystery to other people who don't attend. Can you shed a light on what it's actually like? I've heard there's a stoplight at the entrance of the church to let regular attendees choose their seat before visitors, or the rigidness and, for lack of better words, doom of their sermons, lack of grace and hope. Okay, so the stoplight, I asked around a little bit, asked opinions for some people. It's a real thing in some NRC and RCNA churches. It's quite small. It's like the size of a toonie or something else like that. And it's a red light at the back of church when that's on, and visitors need to wait to get their seat so regular attendees can get their seats first. And a few minutes before the service starts, it will turn off so the visitors can also get a seat. I've seen this myself a few times. So this happens in some of those churches. So that's just fact. Do with that information what you will. The other part of the question is also important to note there can be significant differences between one NRC to the next. So the NRC in Chilliwack, where I grew up, for example, was considered one of the more liberal NRC churches in North America.
I hate that term.
But that's how it was talked about growing up for me. It was one of the more liberal ones.
Actually, is that the term that people use?
Yeah. And my dad was actually not welcome to preach in some NRC churches because of that. And interestingly enough, the Chilliwack church apparently would be considered more middle of the road among NRC churches if it were in Holland. Okay. Honest, I don't even know how you really measure that. Usually it's in outward things, or sometimes they're preaching the gospel. But
I mean, would preaching the gospel be considered liberal?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So shedding a light on what it's actually like is harder for me, but it's not so much their doom and gloom of their sermons, in my experience. Because in my experience, sin wasn't preached that much. But it
wasn't?
No. And I'll clarify that. But the gospel was not preached much either. It was preached, but not much in my perspective. So my experience was more a big sense of apathy. And what I mean is that sin was not preached that much. Is that our greatest sin, which is not believing in Jesus, was not taught or talked about very much. Like, it was normal to be unsaved. Like, our rejection of Christ is ultimately what we're going to get sent to hell for, right? Yeah. That is the biggest sin in our hearts. And so that wasn't considered really a sin. It was normal to be unsaved.
So can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
So that is what I have found fascinating as I like objectively read scripture now, especially like reading through the New Testament, and you read all the letters from Paul and all the other chapters. I always find it fascinating that based in there again, I mean, I'm a dumb farmer reading the Bible, but like it looks to me and it feels to me like the word is written to the believers.
Yeah.
Like not all of it.
Yeah.
There's harsh and there's serious warnings like, search out your salvation with fear and trembling and all these, and just warnings of being unsaved in hell and is real. But just this idea of like, just you read these letters and like they're preaching as if everybody's in the church is basically saved. Right. And so that was very counter to kind of my beliefs as a kid, right? Where it's like, okay, the whole
all the forms I grew up with in church as well, they were all written to believers as well. Like the baptism form starts with beloved in the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So what I would say, and this is where I don't know, like they're going to be very interesting. You could find a guest on who's way older, who knows maybe even your dad or somebody like that, who really knows this history well.
Yeah, I would love to have an elder or a pastor on from one of these churches.
Like somebody that could really delve into history. But I'm guessing that a lot of things, because this is what happens with everything, and it happens in every church and every denomination. It happens with
telephone.
The telephone.
You like pass information off one person to the next and it changes.
Well, just the heart, where you end up is often different from the heart of what started it, right? Like if you think of the Reformation, or if you think of some of these things that were like, if you think of Martin Luther and if you start to read what Martin Luther taught and you think of, hey, that's where we were coming from.
Yeah. So
it doesn't necessarily line up well at times, right? And that's human. That's going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen with anything. But.
So like I said, the majority of the members would say they're not saved, but still, you could still become a church member and not be saved. You could still baptize your kids and not be saved. You could
that would be controversial.
Yeah, you could become an elder or deacon and not be saved.
That would be very controversial, would it not?
It was. I don't agree with that. Like, I think you need to be saved to baptize your kids, and then you'd be saved to be a member. I think you'd be saved to be like otherwise, your Romans 3 says your heart's like an open grave. Like you have no use for God at all if you're an unbeliever, right? So if you hate God and don't follow Christ, like it's black or white, then it doesn't.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was a lot more emphasis on some outward rules on how you dressed or what you did on Sundays.
There again, that would be very different
depending on who you talk to. Exactly. Yeah. So my belief is the gospel is not clearly preached due to tendencies towards hyper-Calvinism that overemphasize the fact that being saved is a one-sided work of God. I was taught there is nothing we can do ourselves to be saved. And I would sit in church waiting for God to save me and thinking I wanted to be saved, but waiting for God to do it. And so I didn't feel that responsible. So I was guilt-free to an extent, right? Because I'm like, I can't do anything to be saved.
I don't think that was actually taught though, eh?
No, I don't think that was taught either. Like you were told to use the means to read the Bible and to pray. But often when the gospel was offered in a sermon, right afterwards, it would be, but you can't do it yourself. And so it's like, the interesting thing is if you look up the Canons of Dort, the third and fourth head of doctrine, Article 12, for anybody that wants to geek out.
Well, it's just...
Yeah, it's in the back.
There's lots of good stuff in there.
Yeah, the Canons of Dort is a beautiful document. Yeah.
There again, those were all things that were written from a place of like, hey, we need to hang on to our core doctrines. Exactly. They matter, right? And they do matter.
That's right. So it says in there that we actually believe. How it wrote. Yeah, you need to look it up to fully piece. But it's kind of interesting though that it reminds me of an RCNA friend actually told me one time that very conservative churches and very liberal churches, in a lot of ways are the same, because in the more quite liberal churches, there's a lot of emphasis on helping the poor and mission work and helping other people, and that can become your Christ, right? It can become your gospel, your thing that makes you feel right with God because you're doing all these good things. And in very conservative churches, like if you look at the Amish or the Mennonites or other conservative places, there's often a huge emphasis on,
or just legalistic places would be a better way to describe it.
Outward things, but then that becomes your thing that makes you get right with God again.
Better. Yeah.
And we know that of course is not how we get right with God. So the doom and gloom I observed was more prevalent actually among the 10 or 20% of the members that profess to be saved. And some reasons for this are that it was explicitly stated that if you were certain you were saved, that in itself was already a sign that you likely were not saved. Rather, if you doubted, that was a good sign.
Even in the NRC?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think all of this combined causes people to look inward for so-called proof of whether they're saved or not. And I can tell you for a fact that's not a place where to look for hope or salvation. at least in my
Amen.
case.
Yeah, that's a good word there, Kyle. I
Um,
would agree. That's a good word.
Because if we're honest with ourselves, inside it's just sin. Like, if anybody knows my whole story, it's not a
Or
pretty one.
anybody's story.
Yeah.
Even people that look pretty good, right? And I think that's where people do struggle, is because and I think that's even interesting in those places where it's like, hey, people their lives aren't carnage, right? And a lot of people do a lot of the right things, right? But we're all hopelessly lost on our own, right?
That's right. Well,
So,
pride is a killer too, right?
yeah.
So it's outside of ourselves, looking to Christ, where we can have real hope. And the interesting thing is, when I think I got saved at 21, I started reading what was called the Forefathers, because I was taught growing up that was what a good saved person would do. And they were guys like John Calvin, Martin Luther, J.C. Ryle, Almost O'Brackle, and they wrote was so much different than what I was preached or was taught. And so, but that's where the Reformation started with those guys, and they wrote a lot of these creeds as well, and things we use today. And so, yeah. Now, I do want to say positives as well, because I think there was a lot of good things what I grew up with. For example, when my daughter Grace died, I had meals every day for 2 months, 2 or 3 months. Like, it was awesome. I started prayer groups in the NRC. I was asked by leadership to participate in prison ministry and Mexican ministry, like really cool opportunities. I helped start a youth group for men as part of leading it. Got a lot of like really good work opportunities through the community, and chances I probably otherwise wouldn't have had. And so, yeah, it's not all bad either. I think it's really important for people that are listening, that like to differentiate. Hey, yes, I disagree with what is taught, or what I think was taught in my experience, and I have different beliefs, but it doesn't make it a personal thing. Like, I think we can separate that.
A lot of the teaching too, this is just my kind of view of kind of how I hear it now, like, and I felt like, even for our kids have gone to the preschool and stuff, we felt extremely blessed there, because it is like, just for some of the reasons you're saying, but just the idea of like sound theology and very caring people. But I feel like a lot of when we tend to gravitate, like everything that you're taught, like anything that we're taught, and this is just not about, faith stuff or religion or whatever, theology, this is like in anything, you can always gravitate towards a ditch, right? You got the road and you have the ditches, right? And so wisdom is always needed, and balance is needed. And I think that,
and also knowing what you believe, because
but I think I guess where I'm going with that is, a lot of times when I hear something being said, by a leader or a pastor, and I'm kind of like, well, wow, okay, I don't agree with how you said that, or that doesn't feel totally, if I'm reading all of scripture, that's not where I would land with that statement. A lot of times it just comes from the fear of what the other side is. And I was taught that to some degree. And there again, I feel like, even if I look at, like, my parents are very different people now than they were when I was growing up, and their faith journey, they've changed a lot and really grown. But it's just this idea of like, hey, how are you, like, if you are worried about something negative happening, you're reacting. And then like, okay, what are we talking about? Right. And there's this fear. And I think, like, if you look at, even that's something that I even struggle with my kids. I've shared it on here, but I've just shared it even recently. Like, if you just worry about, hey, where are they going to end up? Well, I got to control, I got to harp on this. Like, at the end of the day, like, they're the Lord's children. I need to have faith. I need to pray for them. I need to speak truth to them. Yeah. But I'm definitely not going to be straight arming them into like just doing all the right things. And even I'll get it wrong sometimes. So it's probably better if they don't they just need to learn to trust God themselves and seek his will for their life on their own. That's really what I should be trying to teach them. Right. And I feel like growing up, sometimes that wasn't the case, because it was way more about behavior modification than heart transformation at times. Because there, again, back to what you said, this idea of like, hey, obviously we can't do any heart transformation ourselves. That's God's job, not ours. But it was like, you couldn't even pray that authentically. If you did, you had to question that. And there again, there people would land in all different areas on that point. Yeah. So I'm always a little leery to be like, you want to be careful. There's obviously people that are wrestling with that question themselves, even at the church they're at, and are just longing to hear more. Hey, just like read the Bible, right? Like,
and also for questions to get answered. Like, if I ask you, for example, hey, what's the best tractor you can buy? and you say go wheel, or but that's round baler you can buy,
Yeah.
and you say go wheel round balers, and you just say, I say, why? You're like, well, because my dad used it, my grandpa used it, and that's just what we do, and that's the best one.
That's not a great reason.
And I'll be like,
that's
okay,
not going to cut it.
no, like I
No.
want to know why. Like, why do you believe this? What
Yeah.
what evidence do you have for what you believe? And if we don't give those answers to people, or people that have questions, then you're not gonna get them to believe it because you don't really believe it, right? And so I think that's true with your faith as well. If you can articulate it and you're fearful, well, that really,
The Bible tells us that we're supposed to be able to give
An answer.
reason for the hope that we have, right?
Yeah.
But there again, I think if you have a culture of unsaved people that are doing really good things, it creates a really dangerous culture. And that's kind of been my experience. The idea of like, boy, the 3 camp thing, I've talked about it on here a bit. And it's everywhere. It's not just at any particular place. It's the idea of like, hey, we're doing the right things. Like, no, there are people that are trusting in the Lord, and there's people that are not, and that's it. And the Bible's pretty clear about that, right?
So I think, but one thing I do want to note, though, I think it's important to note that denominations are actually not that important. Like the churches. Like if I've traveled a bunch and I go to Germany, used to go to Germany quite a bit, like where the Reformation happened, almost no churches left.
Oh, wow.
You know, you go to Turkey where Paul preached, almost no Christian churches left. Where all the churches were that you talked about earlier, where they got the letters, right? And so, but the church is growing.
It's just going to new places.
Yeah, or the denominations come and go, you know, like they shrink and grow. And so it's not like, it's not.
Is that just because people are so tribal?
I'm not sure.
Is that just human nature? It really bothers me. Like when people say to me, hey, what church do you go to? And then want to know what denomination, I'm like, who cares?
What do you think about Jesus?
Well, no,
Who is
even
Jesus to
even
you?
in the denomination we are in, or I don't be a little careful saying this because I don't study up big time on it, but like I know enough to know there are churches that are definitely struggling and definitely probably like everywhere there's sin. So wherever there's a bunch of people getting together, there's going to be some serious problems, right? Yeah. And it's more like, hey, how are we dealing with it? How are we
being up with it?
Yeah.
I was actually talking to Mike Shooten from ARPA about it this week, about how in churches when there's and this is any church, but where leaders can't sin, or there's a super high expectations on leaders not to sin and be perfect, and they're the example to everyone else, well, then no one's going to really be open about their sin. And if you're a leader and you're of sin, you're definitely not going to be open about it because you got to have it all together. And that, I mean, the whole point of the church is that it's not a museum for good people. It's a hospital for the broken.
I had a question for you. Do you believe in the death penalty? Do you believe we should have the death penalty?
Okay, transition.
Sorry, no segue.
Do I believe in the death penalty? You mentioned this to me the other day. We talked about it at your house.
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah, that's how
that's how it got on there.
That's how it.
I've already forgotten that conversation.
And what you said challenged my thought. I'd have always been okay with it, like a death. You kill someone, you're the penalty
dead real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you challenged me, I think, on the grace question, or like it just seems contrary to.
Well, so this shows you how powerful. My mother listens to this, and this is amazing because I remember distinctly my mom challenging me on this when I was a teenager, because I would have been in the camp of like, Old Testament stoning, like justice, right?
Yeah.
There again, thinking I was probably a pretty good person and would never do anything worth of being stoned, obviously.
Exactly.
Didn't totally understand my own depravity. But she always said to me, just challenge that. Probably still believed in, I don't know. I mean, now you can have her on the show. She's a real talker.
I would love her.
A lot more educated than I am. A wise woman, but and very caring. But just the idea of like, hey, is it our place to send somebody to eternity was kind of the idea, right? Of like, that's the most serious thing there is. Do we want to, or should we give them as much time as possible to repent and turn to the Lord? That's what we should do. So she was probably in favor of the idea of death row. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. There again, I'm forgetting exactly what the thought process was, but it was different than the idea of like, I remember reading the BC report when I was a kid, horrific stuff. Like this is when, well, it was before that, even Clifford Olson was the most disturbing thing. I can distinctly remember reading the article. I was probably like 9 or 10, too little to be reading it. Yeah. And it was just about, he was just coming up for parole or whatever, probably been 10 or 20 years, 15 years and 10 years or 20. And it just a rehashing of some of the things he did to his victims, right? Terrible. But just this idea of like, hey, should this person be put to death, or should this person be rotting in a prison cell and we paying $120,000 a year to feed this person, right? And what the idea is. And so anyways, I was just curious but you were obviously, now you're thinking about it.
So. I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
But on that note, my mom actually sent a text to the group chat today, family WhatsApp, which I thought was just a really cool message. And it's a quote from Braden Manning. The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. This is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I did. I mean,
so I think, yes, the fruits of the Spirit get shown in our lifestyle: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Like when we think about how the world sees Christians, it's not because they are doing, like, dressing a certain way that's going to make them like be like, wow, you must be a follower of Jesus. It's like, no, you are gentle when you're not supposed to be gentle. You are kind when, like, why are you kind right now? Why are you self-controlled right now? How come you're not blowing your top? Like, how come, like, that's, they don't fear, right? Like a healthy Christian, the Bible says, fear not. Healthy Christians should just,
and are joyful people,
Yeah.
happy people, which is hard. And there's a lot of sad things going on all the time.
Philippians says, sorrowful yet always rejoicing.
Yeah. One of the listeners, we've talked about this before, but it's I follow Michael Campbell on Twitter.
Okay.
And he's Gordon Campbell, who was the BC premier, the leader of BC.
His son or brother?
Brother.
Okay.
He runs a podcast called Money Talks, financial podcast. Pretty interesting. I would agree with a lot of the stuff on there. Cannot stand supply management. Like daily, multiple posts talking about how it costs every family in Canada, poor family, of course, he always uses the term poor family, right? $550 a year more. And it was fascinating to me because I do a lot of business in the US, mostly importing stuff from the US, ironically, and then reselling it, hopefully for a profit. It's a challenge lately, but you know, as a general rule, that's been my business model. And there's millions of, or tens of thousands of businesses probably that are doing it. And so that just, today, it just irked me. I was at the border today. I was bringing some, some of those American cows in so we could drink our Canadian milk.
Yeah.
And, I see all these other trucks coming through with all this other product, people that are just basically Canadian trucks, right? Just bringing stuff in that are selling it.
Yeah.
And we have this line in the ground here where it's like, okay, everything is cheaper in the US. Like, it just drives me insane where it's like everything is cheaper, right? It's the economy scale. They have 10 times the people. So at some point, and I think it's Mike, our buddy Mike, who talked about having a panel with the food professor.
Oh, yeah.
And we can have Michael Campbell on there, who also hates dairy quota. And we can find a long list of solid guys that can't stand supply management. And then we'll have to get a few educated people that there is negatives. I'm not saying I'm enough of a,
I like the discussion. I think that's how we move forward. You got to talk about things.
Well, and I'll probably just we'll all end up probably just losing respect for each other and being disenfranchised. Well, because it's the idea of like, how could somebody who seems relatively intelligent in most ways, this is what happened in COVID, right? You'd have somebody where it's like, man, you thought they were a great person and then they're just a fruitcake, right? It's like, how can you, but that's the beauty of it. That should challenge how we think about people.
Yeah, but I think that usually is happening when we're not having the discussion. Like we said earlier, how do you become a good listener?
Yeah, just
you got to like listen first and really understand it from their point of view. Like keep learning and listening. Yeah. Like I think that's just really, really key.
Yeah. I guess I do understand that. I would be the first to admit that to some degree, there is an added cost to having supply. There for sure is.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I would struggle with the thought of, hey, all that extra money that it's costing, that's going to instantly go to the consumer. That's where I would, and it's not that much.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways.
Interesting. On that note, if you're like 30, 35 years old and you're pretty mechanically inclined, have done a lot of mechanical work in the last 10 years, like fixing pumps and just, you're like the handyman guy and you're really good at that kind of stuff. And you want to make about $40 an hour, a little over that.
Maybe less if you suck.
Or if you're just starting out. Yeah, but you're want to work for a small company in Chilliwack. I think it's like around 5 people. And I think
character people.
Yeah, good company. I think you would enjoy it. Reach out to me and might have a fit for you. That position is also available though for someone that's already 18 years old, 19 years old, just out of high school and wants to.
You really screwed me up. You said it was 30 to 35. Any age?
Yeah, 30. Well, someone with experience can start at like $40 an hour. If you're want to be an apprentice,
young guy that listens to this,
18, 19 years old, and you know how to work hard, you can probably 25. Maybe you work really hard, 30, but you'll learn a cool trade. Reach out and might have a fit for you. So,
okay. Busy week in real estate.
Make a lot of money.
Crazy. Not enough. Can never make enough money, right? I told you that.
It just always, I love the honesty.
What, when I talk about how greedy I am?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways. No, it's just when you've made.
I think you're a pretty generous guy, Gary. I'm giving you
Well,
my
I'm
time.
for sure greedy too, but I just know because I've been on all ends of the spectrum. I've been very broke in my life, and I've gotten big checks selling stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's no amount of money that can really satisfy the soul, right?
Yep.
And if you've never gotten that, then you are still chasing that. But I mean, I think it was the Jim Carrey quote said, he said that he wished everybody could be rich and famous so they could see it's not the answer. But it's
Do
fascinating.
you feel rich?
Do I feel rich? No.
Do you think I'm a rich man?
No.
No?
No.
I genuinely do. And I know you have more money than me.
Sorry, do you feel like you're rich?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, like I genuinely do. Like if you compare how I live to most other people in the world,
Yeah.
it's wild.
I mean, I feel like I totally have enough, and I feel like I can support things, but I do not feel like I'm like exorbitantly wealthy by any means. I just
Not
feel
exorbitantly wealthy, but like our standard of living is high. We are in the 1%. For sure.
Yeah.
If you're making over 60 grand a year, you're in the 1%.
I always look at it like, and this is there again, my perception is so skewed because I spend quite a bit of time on the streets. Like I was downtown at Ruth and Naomi's the other day throwing a football with some dude. And
applied at Salvation Army Shelter.
Okay, awesome. You'll fit right in there.
I know, I am excited. I will fit in. I'll fit right in.
It
By the
is.
way, next week, Matt Keane will be
He's
taking
filling
Gary's
in 'cause
spot.
I'm
Gary's
going
out,
on
so
a
we're going to
holiday.
fill in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
look
Anyways,
forward
when
to
I came home and told my
that. Send in
wife
questions. Send in questions about
Yeah,
the Bible
from
or
Matt
anything else
Keane.
like that. Send them in.
Anything.
We'll answer them.
about the army.
Yeah.
He's got a gun now too, so now he really is an officer.
Scary.
I like it. Yeah, I know. He comes here in his flip flops and his jammies, shooting a. I'm just like, what is going on? I'm out of here. Between you and him, nobody's safe. But I was saying, I came home from the Ruth and Naomi's, and I told my wife I had thrown a football around, and she just skewered me, man. At home with 6 screaming miserable kids, and you're downtown Chilliwack. It's 31 degrees, throwing a football with some homeless bum. What are you doing? Get home and be a dad.
That's way easier though, isn't it?
Throwing the football was way easier. It was awesome. Yeah, it was pretty freeing actually. And I found my our daughter's parents, right? So that was kind of my point. And then I hung out with them for a bit. Just said hi to them, and I always show them pictures of the girls. And
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah, tell them we're praying for them. But anyways, where was I going with that? Yeah, that's enough. I think we can end it there.
Let's see if there's anything else.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff on there. I could give a real estate update. That's why I started talking about real estate.
Oh, last week you.
So I have lots of clients looking.
This example, ping pong ball in the wind, Gary's brain. He was going to give a real estate update. He ended up throwing a football with some homeless person. But now we're back on track again.
Yeah, well, because I've had a very busy real estate week because I have
That's right.
many people
That's
that
right.
want to buy places. And so it's just such a fascinating market because it's a very soft market. Like if you talk to any realtor, you listen to any real estate podcast across Canada, other than Winnipeg. I have one set of clients that just sold their place here in BC and they are moving to Winnipeg and they are not happy because that's the one market that's pretty hot actually, which makes sense, right? Because it's just pretty reasonable there. But in the Fraser Valley here, it is a tough market. But if you have any super desirable product and it's price sharp, it will instantly sell.
That's like anything.
It's just, there's just all these buyers that are like, do want to buy, but everybody's like, it's too much. And sellers take.
If it's sharp, if it's price sharp, it's still too much. If it's
there's just, if a product has any strike against it, like, and yesterday, I don't know, I probably looked at 8 places yesterday, right? Okay. So I had a pretty decent buying day tour, and you go look at all these places, and out of all of them, they all had like strikes against them. Either they have a cat and there's a whack of cat hair on the floor. Like, get rid of the cat if you want to sell your, like, nobody wants cat hair. And I mean, it's fine. Like, you can sell it, but it's just people that don't like cats don't want to buy a place with a whack of cat hair. Yeah. The next place, like, light bulbs are burnt out and the paint's all chipped off the wall, like low hanging fruit.
Like, put lipstick on the pig?
No, just like get rid of the pig, slaughter the pig, and just make it look proper, man. Just put some effort in. So
what percentage of price do you think that makes? So if you have a BC box.
Oh, it's horrible. Because today I went to a place and showed clients a place today in Sardis, which is a desirable part of our town.
Yeah.
And it was a detached home. And it was a crappy old house, let's just say, for lack of a better word. It didn't, in a lot of ways, it was pretty crappy. But they had it showing like 10 out of 10. It was perfectly clean. There was no, like, everything was clean. You could tell the bathrooms were clean. There's no dogs, pets inside the house. The cupboards were archaic, but they had them cutely painted. So, like, it's fascinating how, and Marie and I have sold a lot of houses over the last 10 years, 12 years together. And we've had that many, many times where it's just like, if people can come in and they feel like, wow, it's got that feeling of like homey, not too much crap, clutter. And there again, you can just tell the people that have had good advice.
So the pool of likely you'll sell faster that way, and likely you'll sell it for a little bit more that way.
You'll just sell before all the other ones. And in a declining market, which we're in right now, like we're for sure in a correcting market to some degree, right? Like people are just,
but how much money do you want to spend? Okay, so that one was just clean.
Most of that stuff is very reasonable. Like even paint.
Yeah.
Like
it's not, it's just some manual labor. And like,
nobody likes your bright orange bedroom. Like maybe that brings the fire there for you, but like nobody else wants that, right? Weird. Anyways, there you go.
I do know that, like, so when I sold both my houses, I sold them both privately, and like one of the reasons I did was I hate dealing with showings.
Well, you just didn't want the criticism from people like me.
No, I don't want to have to clean the whole house up.
All your weird artwork
twice a day, 7 times a week, because someone wants to all of a sudden see my house. Like,
it's funny you said that, because I'm listing another really nice detached in Sardis.
Okay.
Hopefully in the next week, I think.
Yeah.
And beautiful home, probably 3,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms in a great area. And like I was talking to my clients today about that. Like, what do you price at? And like I said, hey, yeah, you can list for $50K more and go do the science experiment and because I have a few listings that I've had a lot of showings and no offers. And like that gets really tiring after a while, especially for people with lots of little kids.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have sold privately too, and same thing, pretty awesome. There doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
And I would say as a general rule, you would leave money on the table. Not always, as a general rule. Yeah. But
depends what market.
Paying a realtor is expensive too. And
both times I took that off the price.
Okay. You just literally agreed on a price and then said, hey, did you eat the whole commission?
It was written up privately too.
Yeah, but did you take the commission right off the top?
Yeah.
Like the whole commission?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what's funny to me when people get sticky, because you see it all the time. You'll see a place was listed at 1.4, a detached home. And I've worked on deals where they're just like, oh, we're not taking less than 1.3, and you offer them 1.2. And then 2 years later or 3 years later, you look at the history, sells for 1.1. Or I saw a place in Fairfield Island the other day, it sold for about $350,000 less than where they first started having it listed at. So just chased it all the way down, right? So you just got to decide if you actually really want to sell and if you care.
Yeah, I remember actually, I was with worked at Jake's Construction. Yeah, and I would go with William Clausen. He was my boss. Learned a lot from him actually. He introduced me to Simon Setting, a lot of leadership stuff that I talk about.
Okay.
And went to the Richard Bush auction, and I said, and he would be bidding on the equipment that would need to get bought, I guess. Yeah. And so I'm like, how do you do this? Fun. And he's like, you have to have a number in your head of what you're willing to pay, and be
prepared to walk away.
That's your number. You don't have to go like
that's not me at an auction.
I know. That's why I probably wouldn't be good
at the auction that I should not have in my barn.
Yeah, so there's obviously different strategies that work. Sometimes you have to go off gut, but I think that's partly a good way to think about it, is like you protect yourself that way. Be like, hey, this is what I think the value is to me, which everyone's number is different. If it's a piece of equipment or whatever, like depending on what jobs you have going on.
I always joke with clients like, hey, money doesn't have feelings. Like, money doesn't have feelings, but the people that hold the money, they sure do, man. And they are very sensitive, and people just get offended so easily, right?
Yes.
But then even with an offer, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, who cares what people, like, why would you call that a low ball offer? Like, that's what they're prepared to pay. It's real money. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I've sold, a lot of real estate in the last 4 years, but I would always consider myself a buyer's, in the sense that, like, I always tell people you can make your money up front, right? And you just buy right, don't overpay, don't get carried away. And we're just in this weird phase where I listened to another podcast, real estate podcast today that I listened to out of Vancouver. And like, we had a run up from 2015 to 2018. And this is,
now you've talked about this, like basically you just get rich sitting
doubling, right? Doubling. And it's just, it gives people unrealistic expectations. And now
what's the purpose of buying your house? Is your purpose to buy your house?
It's to live in. It's to live in. And so theoretically, if you invested your savings properly, you should be able to theoretically rent and invest your money. And there's a lot of people that would advocate for that.
The flip side, in the 70s, you were a teacher making $35,000 a year, and house prices were 80, 90, right? And
that is normal, by the way. 3 times annual salary is normal house price, like 3 to 5 times. Yeah. And I think we're sitting at about 8 or 9 right now in BC. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. But
anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Like, share, comment, subscribe. That goes a long way. If you have any questions, send them in, and I'll see you next week.
Take care.